All right, I think we're going to go ahead and start since we are 1 minute past 10 and folks may join us along the way. But I just want to welcome you all here to our first program, virtual program back after the holidays, our first program of 2021. I can't believe it's finally here. So I'm Brittany Branyan, and I serve as Director of Carey Center Collegiate and Community Programs, to include the nonprofit affiliate program, currently serving over 130 nonprofits in East Alabama and beyond. Welcome again to our first program of 2021, Why You Need an Annual Report. I've wanted to put together an annual report for the last 2 years, but I haven't known where to start. And so I'm really excited about this program. Jennifer Shawa is here today to tell us what goes in one and a little bit about why they are important. So before we begin, I would like to share a little more about the nonprofit affiliate program because I see a couple of people who are new. The Carey Center Nonprofit Affiliate Program fosters a community of educators, professionals, organizations, and students who have a desire to embody philanthropy, nonprofit studies, and leadership in their professional and personal lives. We provide professional development and networking opportunities to members to include Mix and Mingles, the Carey Center Volunteer Internship and Career Fair, also called Meet Me at the Vic, and the Carey Center Nonprofit Summit. In addition to these events, now more than ever, we are focusing on professional development and learning opportunities. The Carey Center nonprofit affiliates are the first to learn of upcoming programming, and membership is free. You can join us at aub.ie/MPAAPP. Now, let's get to the reason you are all here. Please join me in welcoming back to the Carey Center today's speaker, Jennifer Shawa. Jennifer Shawa has spent the last 18 years working in the nonprofit development field. In her own life, her passions have centered around helping moms, children, and families. And that's what led her to Twin Cedars Youth and Family Services in 2017, where their vision is to believe you can make a difference in the life of a child. Jennifer has raised over $4 million in the nonprofit sector, starting as development director at Nonprofit Medical Clinic in Columbus, Georgia, then as a fundraising consultant for a variety of agencies in the Columbus area. A graduate of Columbus State University, her areas of expertise include fundraising, event planning, strategic growth planning, marketing, and public relations. Jennifer oversees development efforts for 20 plus programs of Twin Cedars in Macon, Columbus, LaGrange, all in Georgia, and Auburn and Opelika, Alabama. While she loves her job as Director of Development and Marketing for Twin Cedars, her favorite titles are at home, where she is mom to 6 teens and young adults and wife to Jason. Please help me welcome Jennifer Shawa.
Well, thank you, everyone. It's good to be with you again, and I really appreciate the opportunity for us all to talk about annual reports together. I feel like, just as Brittany just said, with the background that I've had in both small and large nonprofits, I have really had to learn how to build an annual report over time just by kind of doing it. And so I love the opportunity to talk with you because we can learn together. And that's what I think is the beauty of the Carey Center, is that we can have opportunities to come together like this and help each other and learn together. So thank you for the opportunity to do that. And I have a PowerPoint. So if I can, let me see if I can you enable the screen sharing so that I can? All right.
I should have done that already. Let me do that. There you go. You should be able to now.
All right, let's see. Can you all see my PowerPoint now?
Yes.
Showing up? Okay, great.
Yes.
All right. So let's just dive on in. First, I'm curious, how many of you have created annual reports before? Can you show me with your hands how many? Is it your responsibility to? And I'll point out too that Laura Beth Barrow on the screen, she works with me at Twin Cedars. And so anything that I say in terms of content or I don't know what to include, I want you to know that she's the one that makes it look pretty for us. So she does work alongside me to get these done every year. Let's jump in and talk about, first of all, why do we need an annual report? And sometimes people are a little bit confused about what an annual report is. And there is a type of annual report that is legally required, but that's just the IRS Form 990. Most 501c3s are required to file that with the IRS each year. And that's something that also private foundations will also have to file. And then if you're a real small nonprofit, if you have gross revenue of under $50,000, there's actually a postcard format for that can be filed. But that is not the type of annual report that we're going to be discussing today. But that is the one that sometimes people think they have to have. There are a few exceptions to people or agencies that have to file the Form 990. If it's a faith-based organization like a school or a religious school or a church or some government corporations or state institutions that provide essential services, those are sometimes excluded, but definitely check with the IRS to see what your requirements are. And then for those that file their Form 990, which is basically like a report card of your agency, how you're doing, those are actually all accessible on GuideStar. So it is important to make sure that your agency is filing those for more than just the legal requirements. It's also a place that GuideStar is a place that a lot of donors will use as their first stop if they're looking for an agency to give to, or if they're curious whether they should give to your agency, they'll pull your Form 990 up and take a look at how you're doing. So what we're talking about today is the annual report publication. And yes, I do think we each need one. And the reason I think that is because it's a great opportunity to tell your story for how you've done that year, what impact you've had. And also a lot of funders require that you have an annual report, because if you, for instance, get a grant, they might very well ask for you to send a copy of your annual report to them. If you get United Way funding or some governmental funding, there's definitely the likelihood that they will ask for your annual report. So better to have it ready to send right when they ask for it. It's a great opportunity to celebrate your year's highlights as well. And in your annual report, the printed publication that you make or your digital publication, you have the opportunity to spotlight your accomplishments. You have the opportunity to attract and cultivate new partners, and also to recognize the partners that have been with you throughout the year and who have helped you to succeed in that calendar year or that fiscal year that you're highlighting. So I think we all can agree that sometimes the word annual report sounds a little bit stale. So you can choose to call it an annual report, but sometimes people choose to call it something different too, like an impact report or a gratitude report, a generosity report, a community report. So there's a lot of different things you can name it. You don't have to call it your annual report, even though that might be what it technically is. Have y'all had any particular other names besides annual report that you've used that you'd like to share?
I call ours our year in review.
Okay, I like that. Very good. All right. So whenever you're starting to think about your annual report, the first thing you need to ask yourself is, who is my audience? And audience is always important when you're compiling information. So if your audience is donors, then I really encourage you to focus on using language of gratitude. And remember that what you're letting them know that your agency accomplished is really their accomplishment as well. So really use that language of you helped make the following initiative possible. These are things that they accomplished by partnering with your agency. So let's celebrate that. And also remember too that donors, stakeholders, volunteers, there's a lot of people that give more than just financially. So your annual report can be a place that you can celebrate those other contributions that they've made to your agency as well. If your audience is the public, just remember that as you write, you don't want to write with the type of language that's very kind of in-house. You don't want to use a lot of acronyms or a lot of technical terms. And, you know, I was thinking about this. Have you ever been around someone who's in the military and you can't understand half of what they're saying because they have a lot of language that they're very familiar with, but we don't really necessarily know what they mean. We can tend to do that in our nonprofits too. I know around my office, our Child Advocacy Center is in our building, and they often have multidisciplinary team meetings. But what we hear is the CAC is having their MDT. And there's probably stuff like that around your agency too. It's kind of just acronyms that we use, but don't include those sorts of things in your annual report because no one will understand what you're talking about. So be real careful about that. And then when you're making an annual report, you always want to choose a theme and a message that's going to act like the glue that holds your message together. So your theme should be based in the mission of your organization. It should be interesting, and the design of the report should reflect and reinforce the theme that you choose. So here's where I like to start. I like to start with a brainstorming session. So what we've done around our office is we sit down with a notepad and a paper, and sometimes a laptop where we can pull up Google too to kind of Google words and find synonyms and things like that. But the goal of this brainstorming session with your team is just to throw out a lot of ideas on paper, and then you're going to whittle that down. So ask your team, what are the key accomplishments that we want to share from this year? What has characterized our year, or what has gone on in the world around us? So for instance, this year, as Laura Beth and I are putting together the annual report, we've chosen to talk about the pandemic and talk about the ways that it has impacted our mission and changed the way we've delivered services. So it's a good idea to talk about the things going on around you as well, because this is a living kind of historical document that will be an interesting thing for us to all look back on in the future too, as to how our agency managed around the circumstances in our world right now. So think of descriptive words or phrases that you've heard a lot throughout your agency that year, words that could describe the successes or the challenges, and then just make a big list, make a word bank. And then as you talk to others around your agency about that, they might say, hey, I really like that, or hey, what about this twist? Or no, I really don't like that. And that word bank and that brainstorming record can be whittled down until you find a theme that you can be excited about. So here's some examples of some themes that others have used. The AARP used people. The CDC Foundation used embracing communities. Ideas into action, the power of one. I like how the American Dietetic Association used a theme one year called a recipe. That seems fitting. And transforming was one that was used by Habitat for Humanity one year. I know at Twin Cedars this year, our theme is overcoming, and you might have seen that on the front cover of this PowerPoint. But we are talking about the ways that we as an agency have had to overcome not only the pandemic difficulties that have come our way, but also our children that we serve are overcoming a lot of things that they've gone through, such as trauma or victimization or foster care, things like that. So it's a theme that has multiple meanings. Do y'all have any themes that you've used before that you found really effective or that you've really liked? Anybody want to share? All right. So let's talk about what an annual report should include. The first thing you want to do is You want to know why you're making your report and why your mission is needed. So make sure that you weave those things in. And then when you're thinking about your content, the most important thing I want to stress is that we don't want to make our annual report a big giant record of all the things that kept us busy during the year, our activities. We want to really not make a list of activities, but instead focus on what we accomplished. So it shouldn't be a laundry list of all the activities that occurred. It should show what those activities brought about in terms of accomplishments or outcomes. So remember that donors and stakeholders, they don't really care about what kept you busy. They want to know what impact you made as a result of being busy. So here's an example from our agency. If I were to be writing all about our outputs or our activities, I might frame it like this. Our Child Advocacy Center conducted 250 forensic interviews with child victims of crime. And that's important, and that is what we do. But a better way to put that in terms of an outcome is our Child Advocacy Center gathered evidence that led to the arrest and conviction of 35 local perpetrators of child abuse this year. So that's something that shows what those forensic interviews led to, that made a difference in the community and for that child. So let me encourage you to think about what you write and then look back over it and ask yourself, am I talking about my activities, or am I talking about what those activities led to, what they accomplished? Do y'all have any examples of outcomes versus outputs in your agency? All right.
For us, again, we haven't done one yet, but I'm thinking in my mind, because initially I would just list all of our programs, but what it means for us is we could talk about those programs, but what has really happened are the new nonprofits that have come to know about us. And so we would focus instead on the nonprofits that have come to know about our organization, right?
Right. And the trainings that you've equipped people with. So, teaching more nonprofits how to write their annual reports, that would be, an outcome rather than a, output of held a class.
Yeah.
It equipped 20 nonprofits to prepare their annual reports. So yeah, that's a good example. All right. Here is a slide that has a list of all the things that can be included in an annual report. It's not limited to this. And I also want to say, you might not want to include all of these things. So definitely think about what your nonprofit's most important information is and pare this down if you're making a very small annual report. But these are pretty common things to be included in most annual reports. And so now I'm going to talk about them one at a time. So your annual report can include a president or board chair's message. This is something that sometimes larger agencies will include. It's not something that I think is absolutely necessary, but I would say that the executive director's message is probably more important in this document. You want the executive director's message to include what he or she is most proud of from the past year and his or her vision for the upcoming year. This is a great opportunity to do what I call putting flesh on the document. You want to let their voice be heard. They might have a unique voice in writing, and people tend to know who they are. So let their voice come out and let people connect with the person who is in charge of the agency. You can include team introductions. Now, this again is something that you don't have to include, but if you're making a larger document, or if you have people on your board of directors or your staff who are known in the community or really lend credibility to your organization, it might be a good idea to include their names or their faces in your document. I've seen some agencies that work with teens that have really creative annual reports. And I stuck this fact in here. If it's an informal feeling annual report, you can share silly facts about staff members. There really is, there's the whole gamut of ways that you can do an annual report. So if you have an agency that works with certain audiences, they might enjoy a very lighthearted introduction of staff members. And then there might be a need for a more formal introduction for other agencies. Your annual report can include the accomplishments that happened around your agency that year, and think in terms of not everything that happened that you're proud of, but maybe think of 3 top key achievements for the year. And again, frame them in terms of outcomes, not outputs, and tell stories around those accomplishments. Through your impact stories, this is how you can connect with people's hearts. And statistics are important. And I love statistics. I love data. And so my brain just connects well with that. I enjoy seeing that data, but a lot of times people need to see stories, not just data, because a story is what engages their heart, not just their mind. And also remember that if you're writing a story, have you ever picked up a document and you saw just words and words and words and words and got overwhelmed and you said, I'll just read that later? Keep that in mind when you're writing your impact stories. You do want to keep them brief. You want to keep them about one person. So think about the fact that sometimes people connect better with a story about one person. So let's say I'm going to tell you the story of James, a little boy in our program, and how he really succeeded by participating in our program. That might connect better than we served 35 young boys who succeeded in our program. So using a name, using a story of one person is a really great way to help people connect emotionally with the mission of your program and tell a story of success. You want people to feel inspired after they've read it, and you want them to be ready to get involved. All right, please consider including quotes. I find that one of the ways we can tell stories briefly without having really, really wordy documents is simply to include quotes, because they speak for themselves. We like to include little notes that children or parents have given us, or just simple quotes that are in their own words telling the impact that your program had on their life. So you can sprinkle them around your document, or you can have a whole page of quotes, whatever you like, but they're a great thing to include. Also, if you have a person from the community who is willing to endorse your program, you might find that that's an interesting thing to include in your annual report. Your annual report should include your mission and vision statements. And that is sort of what makes the case for why your agency is needed. Most annual reports include a donor list, and this is that famous list of all of the people who have given to your program in the last year. And it can get quite long. I know we've all seen some annual reports that just have pages and pages of lists of names. And we don't necessarily look at each name, but if you're a major donor, you're probably going to pick up that document and you're going to look to see if your name is in there, if you've invested a good amount of money with that mission and you want to know that they noticed you. So you can decide as an agency how you want to include your donor list. A lot of people will create just a major donor list. I find that you can't include everybody because it just gets too long, but there's not really an expectation that a $5 donor will be in there as much as there is with what we would classify as a major donor, and you get to decide how you define major donor. You can also consider including monthly supporters or Giving Society members, maybe as a separate section, or putting an asterisk next to their name if they support your program on a monthly basis. That's a way to honor them. Some places have membership type donors. So maybe an arts agency or a other types, museums, things like that, they sometimes have members, and that's how they raise their funds. And so you might identify yours as member donors in your annual report. And then you can decide how to classify them in the donor list, either by giving level or alphabetically. I know at Twin Cedars, we like to have 2 categories, one for organizations and one for individuals. And then we just simply list them alphabetically. And then it's great to include spotlights of the people that have made a difference that year for your agency. So here's an example. This is just a little frame we pulled out of an annual report from last year. And I told King I would mention that you should all know that King is an Auburn grad. So he is on our board over in Macon at the Georgia Industrial Children's Home, and he's just been a great volunteer and donor. But this was an example of, we call them hero spotlights that we do for our donors. And it's something that you can include in an annual report. And people really love to feel honored to be spotlighted in that way. And really remembering that an annual report is a record of what donors have accomplished by partnering with your agency to make an impact. This is a great visual way to do that. All right, an annual report should include a financial statement. And I want to really stress that this is not the right place to have excessively detailed financials. You don't need to have a lot of the details. You can really just put the basics in here. I put an example of the type of financial statement that would be appropriate. And as you can see, it doesn't get down into the weeds too much. It's just kind of a higher level view of your financials. And then you do need to have a more detailed report available if someone requests it, but you don't have to put that in your annual report. You might choose to depict your financial statement in using infographics. And this is an example of how that can be done. And we'll talk in just a little bit about tools you can use to create those infographics. All right, in your annual report, please be sure to include contact information, because you're going to be giving this document out to people, or they'll be viewing it online. And the goal is that they get excited about your mission and the impact that you're making, and they want to either give or they want to get involved, and they need a way to contact you. So don't leave that out. And then it's great to suggest some ways that people could get involved, so that they know what their different options are. And here's another example. This is a little half page in our annual report that is about to be published, but this just gives a variety of ways that people can help the agency and get involved. And by giving a variety of options, people can choose the form of involvement that fits them best. All right, and this is the last one on my list. If you are a part of an accrediting agency, then it's typical for you to put their seal on your annual report so that people know that you are affiliated with that accrediting agency. And then don't forget, whenever you're finished with your creating of your annual report, to give a copy or multiple copies to those agencies that you are affiliated with. Did anybody have any information that they include in theirs that wasn't in this list? Any ideas to add to the bucket? Okay. So whenever you're reviewing your annual report, always think not just about what you should include, but also what you should not include. And again, we talked about the language that we use. Make sure that as you look back through what you wrote, that you don't see jargon or acronyms. Leave out the boring administrative details. It's very easy whenever we are working in the daily administrative side of an agency it's easy for us to think that that's what we're doing all the time. And then all of a sudden that's what we're talking about. Like, oh, I just spent 3 hours putting together, a financial report. That is not what donors want to hear about. So leave out the administrative stuff and just remember that that is necessary activity, but it's not what we need to highlight in our annual report. And then also we might be real proud of our fundraising. We put a lot of time and effort into our fundraising campaigns and our events, and those keep us very busy. But we do need to remember that fundraising is not the goal of our organization. It's just a means to accomplishing the mission. We need to fundraise in order to have that mission impact. But we want to be talking in our annual report about mission impact, not about our fundraising activities. We can mention our successes, but we don't want to let that be all we talk about. All right, what's the budget for your annual report? And this is where a lot of agencies really get a little discouraged, because sometimes it can feel like it's too expensive to make a really nice annual report. So just remember that your budget will tell you what kind of annual report you can realistically do, but you can create an annual report even on a small budget. And of course, you can create a really nice annual report if your budget is larger, but those costs are they're determined by how you design it, whether it's in-house or outsourcing, a digital versus a printed version versus a video version, and then how you distribute it. If you are mailing it out to people, the budget needs to be a little bit higher, but if you need to keep the cost lower, you can just send it out digitally. So what format should you use, and does design matter? Well, there are a lot of different formats that you can choose from, and design does matter. And if you feel overwhelmed with design, just keep it simple, maybe make a smaller report. But a great way to start is to look at what other agencies' reports look like. So I know, I'll raise my hand and you raise yours too if you're guilty of this, guilty in a good way. Do you scrub the internet and ask for everybody else's annual reports to have a copy and an archive, and I kind of use it as I have a folder that I pull out for inspiration, and I kind of pick through everybody's and I go, ooh, I really like that. Oh, I don't like this so much. And I piece together from all of the ideas that I've learned by looking at others and create a new one that's a new design for us. Okay, let's talk about some format options for printed pieces. The first rule is there are no rules. It's really fun to see all of the different ways that people are creating annual reports now. So even if it's not in my list, you might be the person who creates the next greatest idea for an annual report. But some traditional ones have been just a short format printed piece that's 4 pages or less. It focuses only on the highlights. And it's a good thing to have if people are already pretty familiar with your organization and your mission, because you don't have to go into a lot of detail. This type of printed version is usually pretty affordable as well. And then there could be a long format, which Twin Cedars, the agency that I work for, is a very large nonprofit. We have over 20 programs under our umbrella. So it's very difficult for us to give the information that we need to give in 4 pages or less. So ours does tend to be longer, but that's not necessary for every type of nonprofit. And it's just up to you. If you do have a longer format, you can include more inspirational stories, but I would suggest that you have a table of contents if you have a document that's getting pretty large. Some people just choose to make a brochure style annual report, and that works well. Here's an example of a poster style, and this is what I mean by creativity, because I think this is pretty neat as a way to depict what has happened around your agency at a glance. So if you haven't thought of doing a poster style annual report, here's an idea of that. There's a lot of infographics. You can see on there that they include their financial report there in the middle. And it's pretty fun to look at. That would be one way to do it. Here is another. It's called an annual report card postcard. And talk about simple. It's literally a postcard. And as you can see on the back, there's a place where you can put a mailing label. It's already got the bulk mail permit printed on it. And then the front is just the highlights. It's easy to glance at. The visuals are good. It's concise. But most importantly, on the back, it does need to include how to get in touch with you, and for more information, how to access your website. So there might be more details on the website that they can look to, but this postcard coming in the mail gives them the overview, and then they can dig deeper if they should choose to. All right, this one, I really loved this one. This one was fun. I'm about to show you this one. All right, can y'all see that? Check that out.
I love that. That's really cool.
Yeah. All right, let me get back to my, yeah, so talk about creative. It looks like a little wallet card or a little business card, and yet it folds right out like a map almost, and it has that information in there. I think that's a little eye-catching, and it's different enough that I think it might make people open it.
I like that one, Jennifer. In the organization that I was a part of before my current role, we had done one just a little bit bigger than that one. It was a 4x6 multifold that opened up like that, and it went over very well. It was a fun one to do.
Yeah, that's really neat. I like that. I don't know that I've seen one like that in person. I've only seen those online. So I'm going to keep my eyes out for some like that I can have a copy of.
Hey, Jennifer, can you show that again? It's Sid.
Sure. Let's see.
Thanks.
Can you see it?
Yeah, that's very cool.
All right, let me get back to my slides. My mouse is being funny. Okay. All right, so let's talk about paperless formats. And the reason that a lot of people would choose to do a paperless format is because it really does reduce cost. You can reach a wider audience if you're distributing it digitally. And so there's some various formats we can talk about for paperless annual reports. And a lot of times people have just made a PDF annual report, and that's something that I think a lot of times doesn't feel overwhelming. Most of us know how to make a PDF out of a document. And in a PDF, the pros are you can hyperlink things in it if you want to. It can be easily posted on your website. They're definitely less expensive to create versus a printed piece. But just keep in mind, PDFs do have some cons as well. Sometimes they can be slow to load on your website. They also are not always super mobile friendly, so it's hard to see the whole document and read it easily from a phone. Another way that people produce annual reports digitally lately are mini sites. It's like a mini website that's an annual report, and it can be a subpage of your website, and it can have a separate URL. It can still be embedded within your website, but you can give it a unique URL that's easy to search and find. And you'll see some examples here on this screen, like the Girls Inc. one. They changed their URL to it's annualreports.girlsinc.org. So it's easy to find and easy to share with people. And I'm going to show you that one in just a second. But the thing that's good about a mini site is that you can add additional content like video testimonials and photo galleries. You can even update it throughout the year if you find something that needs to be edited or some new things that you'd like to post. And in a mini site, the words in it can be easily found by search engines. So it might lead to new visitors viewing your website. And I'll show you a tool in a few minutes that's called Yearly. That's a way that this can be created. Let me show you this one though. And okay, can y'all see this Girls Inc. web mini site? So check this out. This is this is the URL that I showed you earlier. You'll notice there's a menu option up in the top left. And on the menu is the various topics that we talked about including in an annual report. And I'm just going to scroll through this so that you can see what a mini site annual report looks like. Here's their leadership. This is how they display their accomplishments. It's very highly visual and interesting. I like how there's also this menu that can fly out or it can be collapsed, but you can easily jump to other sections if you'd like to. And you'll notice that they've got learn more buttons for donors or for champions that will take you to their donor lists, but it's still clean on the front end because you don't have the giant list in that the first section. You have to click on it to get to it. Same thing goes with their balance sheets and their statement of activities. So this is just a really interesting way to create an annual report and have it housed online to share with other people. All right. And then another thing that people have started doing in recent years is creating a video annual report. And I really like this too, because you can use it so many different places. If you have an event that you want to share this at, this will be something that could have multi-use. But also you can have competitions to ask your donors and your community to share your video-based annual report on their social media to really get more people seeing it. I think that the number of views for something like this have the potential of being much higher than a printed piece that's only being sent to your existing donors. And let's see, I'll show you just a few minutes or a few seconds of this so that you can get a feel for it. So you get the idea. It has quotes from their leadership, it's referencing their financials. And if we were to watch the whole thing, it would kind of come to a complete story. But this is an example of how video could be done. And if your agency has the capability to do video, it's definitely something worth considering. Other forms of paperless annual reports are sometimes I've seen some people just do a conference call annual report and they invite all of their stakeholders to call in and hear what their annual report is. So it's a more verbal presentation. I would assume that they're documenting this presentation as well for when they have to send those things to their stakeholders in the form of a printed piece, but that's a creative idea. And then also using PowerPoint or a Prezi annual report presentation. And I'll show you how that works in just a minute as well. So when you're trying to decide how you want to present your annual report, just ask yourself who the audience is, whether they're tech savvy or whether they really prefer a printed piece. And if you're not sure, just maybe consider doing a survey and asking your stakeholders what they would like to see. So here's my pro tip, and I think Laura Beth would agree. Did we lose Laura Beth? She and I often just have a file folder throughout the year, because what's going to happen is if you know your annual report needs to go out in February, Then you start planning it in November, October, November, and you're trying to remember, okay, what happened throughout the year? And it sometimes is hard to remember all those things that you wish you could remember. So we have folders throughout the year that we just regularly stash anytime something comes across our desk or in our email inbox that is really impactful. Then we stick it in our annual report idea file. And then that's there whenever we're ready to start our annual report compilation. And it gives us a great place to start, and we don't have to try to remember what great things happened because we've already documented it. So consider putting great emails from donors in there. Anytime you have a quote or a success story and just any exciting news throughout the year should go into that file. Another idea is to keep a journal, and not just you, but your whole team. Have them keep a journal where they just jot things down, and that gives you a great starting place for putting your content together. And then determine your target date for completion. And we'll talk about that here. In terms of a production schedule and a plan, I think every agency is different, and I think it depends on what type of annual report you're creating. But I will say this, it seems like it takes 3 or 4 months from beginning to end to have the final product. So plan accordingly, kind of find your end date that you need to have it by and work backward on your calendar to set your dates. And then this is a list of suggested steps to plan out your calendar for creating your annual report. And it's kind of in this PowerPoint for archival purposes, but I'm not going to read all of those. If you're a list girl like I am, this is for you. You can look at it later. Whenever you're completing your annual report, make sure you look back over it with some fresh eyes and ask yourself these questions. Is diversity reflected in your annual report? Because you do want your annual report to be reflective of the population that you serve. And then also make sure you've given credit to everyone who might have contributed or cite necessary sources. If you've used photos that need to have credit included, please don't forget to do that. And then, as always, you have that big file folder and you want to include all the great things that have happened, but sometimes we get to the end of the big pile of things we've put together and we look at it and learn that we have kind of creeped off of our original scope, or we've included too many good things, and just remember that too many good things is a bad thing. So don't be scared to trim. And if you have great parts that you really hate to not share, maybe consider using those on your social media or in e-newsletters or in printed newsletters. They can still be used, but they may not be necessary in your annual report. All right, how do we distribute it once we have it? So these are the people that I think we should definitely send them to. We need to make sure that our board members have a copy of the annual report, those at our accrediting agencies, any of our stakeholders, our donors. And then I really love creating an annual report that serves as a kind of a one-stop document that tells all about our agency. So it's a great thing to take to speaking engagements or to take to conferences, things like that. And then how do we get our annual report distributed? Lots of different ways, every way you possibly can. Post it to your website, email blast it out, and include the link to view it online, and put it on your social media. If your agency has an app, include the link on your app. Send printed versions by mail if you so choose to do that. And then, like I mentioned, you can always put them on your display tables if you're displaying somewhere. And then my favorite is you have a new document that really talks about the things your donors have accomplished. So maybe take the opportunity to stop by your donor's office or their home and drop a copy of it off to them, and just use it as an excuse to say thank you and share that document with them. All right, so I mentioned earlier that we would talk about helpful tools for creating annual reports. And one of the things that I think it gets overlooked sometimes is the the way that PowerPoint is very versatile. So we use PowerPoints for things like we're doing right now for presentations, but PowerPoint is a great kind of a amateur's graphic design tool. So I've known a lot of people who have used PowerPoint to do design work, and that can be done for annual reports. And here's an example I'll play for you. And this doesn't have volume because it's a PowerPoint, and it is just showing the scrolling of content and slides. But you can see how this agency has put together all of the elements of an annual report in a PowerPoint slideshow. And that would be, I think, pretty easy for all of us to do. This might be a tool that we could each create an annual report in some way or the other.
It's almost like a video that you could include in emails or social media. Like, to me, this looks like a lot less overwhelming than producing a video, but with the same type of effect.
Absolutely, for sure. And there's a lot of ready-made templates for annual reports available online. So you don't have to know how to make it look exactly like a professional PowerPoint. You can just go Google it and find some templates that you can start with, and then you plug in your information. All right. So here's another tool that's interesting. This is called Yearly, and it's an online platform that allows you to create stunning digital reports for free forever. That's their tagline. And their site says Yearly makes it fun and easy to design annual reports, event recaps, donor proposals, and board presentations. And I'm going to show you just a few minutes of this, or a few seconds. All right, so that looks like a tool that would be useful if you want your annual report to have a finished and polished look, but you're not a professional graphic designer. So check that one out. Also, we probably all are using Canva at this point, and it is a great tool. And Canva, if you haven't found this yet, it does have an annual report templates section. So that is a great tool for creating professional looking documents when you're not a graphic design professional. Also Adobe Creative Cloud. And I will say, this is what me and Laura Beth use. I had to create our annual reports before having the genius of hiring Laura Beth, but Adobe Creative Cloud has software that's more professional level graphic design, but if you know how to use it, those are definitely a tool that a lot of people use. And then ask yourself, should you hire a designer or should you do it in-house? It might be that the time spent on doing it in-house, if you're creating something complex, if you factor in the amount of time you're spending, it might be less expensive overall just to outsource that to a designer. All right, this is Vengage. This is a great tool for making infographics if you are not a graphic designer. And it says, tell your stories and present your data with infographics. The plans start at $10 a month for nonprofits. I'm going to play you just a second of this. So that is a great place to go to start to build some visual interest for your annual report. Just another tool to check out. Same thing with Lucid Press. It is another tool. Their tagline is, they say, they quickly create and distribute a stunning report with the Lucid Press brand templating platform. And it's intuitive, drag and drop. It creates beautiful on-brand annual reports. And so I've looked at this a little bit. It does look like a great option if you are wanting to have an end product that looks like you paid a lot of money to a professional, but you want to do it in-house. So Lucid Press is another great tool to check out. Adobe Spark is another one similar to that. It is an Adobe product. It's not necessarily for professionals, but it's one to check out that's available. Even if you're not a subscriber to the whole Creative Cloud, you can still access Adobe Spark. And it creates Spark pages. So it's a way to create an annual report subpage on your website. And then the best idea yet is create a really great template one year, and then if you like it, go back and use it as your starting point each future year. So maybe create the wheel the first year and then don't reinvent it every future year. Just go in and put in your new information for the next year and keep using that great template as long as it's serving you well. Have any of you found any other tools that you'd like to add to the idea box? All right, I'm going to show you this. This is what I use. We have a printed annual report, our annual report. This is what it looks like in printed form. So it's a magazine kind of format. That was last year's. And I'll show you what it looks like when we use Flip Docs. And Flip Docs is a great way to take your printed piece and then make it easy to, can y'all see the Twin Cedars website? Okay, so you'll see here, we can click on 2019 annual report and it takes us to the Flip Doc. And as you can see, it's the document that's held up, but it gives us a way to view it like it's a magazine, but it's available hyperlink online that you can share with people. So that's a great tool. And what I've found is that, go back. What I've found is that flipdoc.com just offers that magazine style digital view for much less money than a lot of other places do. A lot of people have flipbook options, but Flipdocs just seems very affordable. And in the nonprofit world, we like affordable. But I will say Issue is another one that does similar things, and it's got a subscription format. So if you have a lot of documents like this throughout the year that you would like to share, then Issue might be the right one for you for $19 a month. So check that one out. And that is the end of my presentation, but I wanted to ask if any of you had any other things you've used or any other thoughts that you'd like to add before we finish, or any questions.
This is Laura Beth, by the way. I know that you touched on talking about, the readability of your information that you put in. Because I know, like, when we go over ours, it's one of those things like, okay, what does that word mean for the average reader? So it's important that even though, like you said, we have our own lingo, it is important to go back when you are editing it and right before publishing to read it with a lens of the average person. Like, what do I want to know from this? And can I understand this without having to look up a word and understanding what that means? So just make sure that you do a good job of being clear about your message and the things that you actually do. But, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jennifer, did you say it was like you need to write almost at a 6th grade level? Is that correct? Just so that everyone is not going to have a degree to understand what you're talking about. So just kind of have that in your mind when you're reviewing your your final document. And if you need to quickly switch in and out some words, because I know that we tend to do that, but sometimes I miss some because I'm more like design focused, but I'm also having to write the content. But it's like, oh yeah, what does that word mean for the average person that's not in house? And so you just
Right.
kind of have to have that lens whenever you're editing.
Exactly. Yes. Always ask yourself, if I did not know anything at all, would I understand at the end of this document what you do and what a difference you made?
I have a question. So do y'all always put out your annual report in February? And if not, like, have you seen where people put them out at different times, or is it always around the first of the year, which makes the most sense?
It really depends on what your annual report is a snapshot of. So some people have their annual report be a reflection of the calendar year, and others have it as a reflection of their fiscal year, which could, begin in July and in June. So there's not a certain right time for you to publish your annual report, but the most important thing would just be that it's timely.
Thank you.
Well, if anyone else has questions, now is your chance. If not, thank you so much for the opportunity to talk about this today. And it's been fun as always.
Yeah, y'all go ahead. I'm going to close out the program, but please feel free to go ahead and type some stuff in the chat, and we'll stay after. If Jennifer has a couple minutes to follow up on them, if you do have any additional questions. But I just wanted to thank you all again for joining us today to learn more about how to build an annual report. I took 4 pages of notes, and I'm so excited to go back and rewatch and really kind of wrap my head around what we're going to be doing in the future. So Jennifer, thank you so much. If you have any additional questions or comments, feel free to email me at branyba@auburn.edu. You'll be getting an email from me either today or tomorrow as a follow-up, so you can always just respond to that. And please go ahead and mark your calendars for our upcoming programs. On Wednesday, February 24th, we have Lindsay Turner from Hands On Nashville, and she's going to be speaking about facing adversity after a year like 2020. And if you know anything about Nashville, Hands On Nashville has helped their community this year through tornadoes, COVID, and most recently a suicide bomb. And I really admire this organization and hope you can make it. We also have Dr. Tyrone Freeman, who is author of Madam C.J. Walker, author of Madam C.J. Walker's Gospel of Giving, detailing Black women's philanthropy during Jim Crow. And he is going to join us on Wednesday, March 24th. So keep an eye out on your email and our social media channels as we go ahead and prepare to roll out that registration. As always, it's going to be free to attend. And unless you have questions to follow up, that's all for today. Thank you again for taking time to invest in your development and that of your organization. And we hope to see you soon.
Thank you.